depending on questions. I'll leave time at the end for conversation. I understand it's going to be a little more challenging given the technology, but again, with chat, we'll be reading the questions for those who can't see it through chat and responding that way. So, I want to also introduce you to the folks who are in the room. On the screen on my right is, well, just so you know who's in the room. In addition to myself, we have Peggy Davis, who's our officer, programs and strategic integration. She oversees our grant-making program. And also our marketing assistant, Rachel Pate, is here, and she'll be helping me to understand and triage the questions as they come in. We anticipate wrapping up right around 1:30 or so, depending on questions. But I'll in advance, if there are things that are not answered, we're encouraging you to email us so that we can post responses online or respond to you directly. You're going to, for the next 15 to 20 minutes, see on the screen the presentation deck, and you will hear my voice, or Peggy's voice, as needed. As a reminder, please mute your phones so we don't to minimize the background noise. Some context setting. The Chicago Community Trust announced on October 7th at our State of Community Luncheon our new strategic framework. Bree Mazzani, our CEO, at that event presented a very broad framework of how we want to operate and issues that we want to tackle moving forward. The purpose of this session is to dig a deeper, give you an understanding of the plan and how it's impacting our grant-making efforts and the trust moving forward. I want to begin by setting the stage that this plan was a function of both board staff and a response directly to what we heard from the audiences that we serve. Those audiences include, of course, the nonprofit sector, the donor community, as well as engaged residents. And beginning with our On the Table platform, celebrate our 90th anniversary, and through other channels, we heard an awful lot from the community. And there was a decision, unplanned decision, to revisit our strategic plan because of what we heard. And for those joining the call, please make sure you mute your lines just so we could minimize the background noise. We embarked on the strategic planning process, which took nearly a year, and again was board-driven, supported by staff here at the Trust. I walked away from that process with a clear commitment to a vision that this organization has held in place for its 100-year sort of history. The power of philanthropy can be transformative. Collective philanthropy is absolutely critical to building strong communities and supporting the idea that people can gather to make good things happen. We always begin these sessions with that because at any point, particularly for a 100-year organization, it's important to revisit your core purpose. After the deep consideration, there was a sort of embrace, a reaffirmation of this vision. Reimagining, or re-embracing, if you will, this vision, there's a very clear discussion and agreement on how we achieve that vision. We've committed to achieving that vision, fulfilling that vision through three distinct ways. First, we want to make those actions and inspire more philanthropy. We as an institution, the Trust that is, are looking to make this region the most philanthropic region in the nation. And that means the residents of this region giving more time, talent, and treasure back to this place that we share. Two, we vision by listening and working directly with residents to create those ideas that will lead to positive, impactful change in our communities. I know this goes without saying for those who know the trust, but it was an important operational point that our work must begin with the voice and partnership we have with residents, the folks who live here and work here. Achieve our vision by convening leadership, resident leadership, civic leadership, and using our resources, our sort of knowledge base, to tackle the toughest issues in our region. I mean, there's a clear consensus among our executive committee, which is our board of directors, that the institution must put its resources behind issues that others may not want to address, but are absolutely critical to address, and if we want to support growth in the region. So high level, walked away from the strategic planning process with three clear commitments. The idea that we are committed to giving nonprofits the resources and tools they need to achieve the most that they can. Simply, please serve the nonprofit sector above and beyond as sort of maker, but a partner. Two, we serve donors. Again, we don't just warehouse resources, but we work with donors to create not only impact, but we work with donors in such a way that we inspire more giving to this region. Three, a commitment, again, building on what I said earlier, to listening to community voice. Listening for those voices that will, in fact, spark change, spark progress. Our work collectively must begin and end with community voice. So our strategic planning process led with sort of those information, sort of clear understanding of like how we go about achieving our vision, what commitments we're making. We also reflected deeply on sort of what we heard from the nonprofit sector that we're most closely aligned with. A number of things that we do must change, must improve, and we heard had an indelible impact on our strategic planning process. So, in summary, here's some of the things that we heard. We heard that our processes, our grant-making processes, were often too time-consuming, laborsome, for profits. It was a high cost to getting or receiving a grant from the trust. We also that there needed to be less pressure to conform to the trust defined outcomes. One way to consider this point is that many peers, if you work in the nonprofit sector, have reported sometimes shifting or drifting away from their core mission in order to satisfy an RFP that was designed and published by the trust. We were in a way taking organizations away from their core business, their core service, their core mission. We also heard that our process was mysterious. How did we make the choices that we made? Why did we choose this set of grantees over another set of grantees? There is a clear call for more transparency, deeper understanding of, again, how we made the choices that we made. I mentioned earlier this notion that we needed to provide more service to the sector. We needed to be more than just a grant maker. So let's combine it with our broad sense of our vision, a recommitment to that vision, how we would achieve that vision. We've created two major shifts in our grant making. If you participated in our State of the Community address, you heard our CEO, Terry Mazzani, speak to these programs at a very high level. The intent here is to go a bit deeper so you can understand the programs and understand how we're going to pivot in this direction. So, as a service to the nonprofit sector, we're creating two major grant programs. One we're calling GO grants, GO being GO, short for general operating, so innovation grants. The GO grant program, as you see here, is before. The idea is that we would provide general operating support versus specific program-related support to the organizations that are meeting essential need in our communities. Those organizations that are working to ensure that our communities are vibrant and are thriving. The aim here is to provide stability to these organizations. And frankly, organizations that operate at a large scale. We'll talk more about that in a minute. The second program, in our innovation grant program, is designed to help the trust become more agile. To be an institution, albeit a 100-year-old institution that moves more like a startup when we need to. And we don't want to be in a way that leads to breakthroughs. We want to be in a position to place bets that our region, our sectors, to leap forward. Those breakthrough moments, particularly in areas of philanthropy engagement, but not exclusive to that. I'll spend a couple of minutes going a bit deeper in these two programs. First, GO grants. As I mentioned earlier, these grants are designed to provide stable support for organizations that are meeting critical needs in our neighborhoods, in our region. These grants are for organizations that also will improve systems and policies that lead to systemic sort of change. I want to be real clear here and helping you understand GO grants. A service or direct service provider sort of need not be an organization that's actively involved in sort of public affairs or public policy advocacy. We include this bullet point to underscore a very important point about our intent. We're supporting these organizations with generating support. We're working to identify systemic challenges and work with partners to meet those challenges. A summary point or short way of actually understanding that is the trust wants to solve problems, not just treat symptoms in perpetuity. We'll find programs that are operating in many of the areas that we've funded historically. What you screen is a list of some of those programs. This list is not comprehensive. If we include every category, we would have probably 2 or 3 more slides, but what we wanted to illustrate here is that many issues and issue areas that we've been committed to in the past, we will remain committed to moving forward. Most prominently, of course, is the broad basic human needs category. We do a lot of work in that space. We fund a lot of organizations in that space, and we'll continue to do so moving forward. I don't see an issue area that you work in there. Doesn't mean on this list. It does not mean that it's not going to get funded, or that we won't be interested in that area. This is just designed to reinforce an important point that we're abandoning sort of key categories that we've worked in the past. A major shift is sort of how we connect and quite frankly, establish our relationship with our nonprofit sort of partners. So how would these programs work? We're going to roll out the GO grant program as a pilot for 2 years. This is a very important choice that we made moving into this space. We decided not to overreach and establish the programs for 5-year, 10-year periods. We wanted to begin in a shorter time horizon in order to learn a lot about this major shift from RFP-driven competitive grant making to general operating support for nonprofit organizations. What does that mean, and how do you administer and manage such a program? That first year should give us a lot of insight. that will impact the long-term design of the program. Excuse me. Another key point in terms of the rollout is that we have made a very clear choice to launch the program by inviting nonprofits that we've worked in the past to participate. Now, this choice is made for a number of reasons. Most importantly, we wanted to build on relationships that we have in place. We wanted to start from a position of strength. This is absolutely critical. Given our new strategic plan, we wanted to minimize the disruption that it would have in the market. Many foundations often have transition years when they move from one strategic framework to another. In many ways, our choice to invite recipients allows us to create some transition from our current reality or immediate recent reality to this new reality of Go grants. As we move forward, most certainly will be our intention to expand the program based on resources available. But again, we're going to be building off of those organizations that we've had in place for the past few years. Now, this means relationship. It does mean that the trust is seeking to award grants and then walk away and check in once a year. We actually want Go grants recipients to be in deeper contact with the trust. We want there to be a very, very robust communication channel between us and grantees. But more important, we want to create sort of ecosystems of learning. We want to place what we're calling learning cohorts. In these cases, we're building off of this existing infrastructure. The aim here is to have sectors deeply engage as a sector and create, while creating opportunities for there to be cross-sector engagement. The thing is, by offering Go grants, we move the relationship to a different level. Not just grantee, grantor, it's partner. And through these learning cohorts, we learn deeply about what's going on in the sector and how the trust can have impact. The collective itself can have great impact. The bullet point you see on the screen is related to a very important that we all struggle with. It's like, how do we measure success? Like, how do we measure our performance? How do we have collective impact? Again, there just to illustrate the point that the cohorts would become very instructive to our future work. Before I go to innovation, I want to underscore a message I said earlier that if you have a question, don't hesitate to type it into the chat box. Rachel, my colleague here, will pass it to me so that either I or Peggy Davis, our Chief Officer of Programs, can respond. You don't have to wait to the end to start sharing questions. And if there's a burning question, I'll stop and respond to that before moving on to the next section of the presentation. Major initiative shift that we have raised as part of our new strategic framework is the creation of the Innovation Fund. At a high level, the best way to consider this fund is that it's a fund that's designed to enrich and incite sort of breakthrough moments for our sector. These are grants for organizations or individuals who are looking to solve very specific problems, very specific challenges. What we consider this is to think about design. Identify a challenge, you prototype solutions to meet that challenge, to solve that problem, you test, and you we want as an organization to be both proactive and responsive to the community with this in this regard. Yeah, just go. I got it. What about that?
He didn't look at those.
Don't worry about it. We're going to figure out how to see both chat and present to deck at the same time, so apologies for the snafus with the deck. Going by Innovation Fund, the area we are most interested in at the beginning of this process, though listed in the middle section of this chart, entrepreneurship, inspiring more philanthropy, and building the public square. I'm going to sort of work backwards and sort of explain what we mean by phrases. First, build the square. Civic engagement, which is a phrase that we often hear, is critical to our work here at the Chicago Community Trust. And it is important because we feel it's our responsibility with our partners to make sure that we're connecting residents so that residents who live in this region can work together to challenges that we face as a collective. I'll use the metaphor of the public square because we feel that it was high level, this idea that community voice, the voice of the collective, sort of must be at the center of public life, of civic life. And we have to do everything we can to nurture that public square. Inspiring philanthropy is connected to, again, one of the broader points I mentioned earlier. The idea that we, as an institution, as a community foundation, should do everything that we can to create a more productive marketplace for the nonprofit sector. At the end of the day, we want Chicago to be a more giving region. Again, giving in the broadest sense of the term, time, talent, treasure. Third, social entrepreneurship, a very broad category. We mostly understand that. But it's there to represent our intent to support those organizations and individuals that are sort of seeking to sort of build, take on risk, and sort of build the type of businesses, if you will, institutions, products that are going to enhance civic space. Again, we know that's very broad, but it is designed to reflect our attention to respond to ideas that are important for the market. How these work? Relatively speaking, small grants. For us, our small grant category is $25,000 or less to $50,000, $75,000. Again, to test these new ideas. A very important takeaway message is that there's a high tolerance for risk with these grants, and according to failure, they're not designed to create or backdoor funding for general operating support. It's designed, the program is to support things that are going to lead to learning that impacts the entire region, the entire nonprofit ecosystem. The program both, meaning that we hear things from the community, and we're going to be creating systems or building out systems to allow it to happen efficiently, and it will be RFP driven, meaning we are proactive in designing a program that we put out to the ecosystem and ask those to join us in testing an idea. To consider that point is to think again of the learning cohorts that I mentioned previously. We want a deep connection with folks who are doing good, working in sectors, cross sectors. Out of those conversations, we imagine identifying trends that require some design thinking, some lab framework, some again to innovation. Before I move forward, I'm going to check in and make sure there are any questions that have been submitted so we can respond to them. Have you seen it? Okay. Question one, To clarify, Go grants will only be available to existing grantees. Yes, the point of clarification, we're looking at our last 3 years of grant making, the relationships that existed during that period, and making choices based on those relationships and what we know about those organizations, and getting folks to participate in Go grants. That's starting place. And based on available resources, we're trying to reach as many organizations as possible, knowing, quite frankly, we may not be able to support all current grantees. Our goal is to grow our resource pool, and I'll get to that more later in the presentation. But after the 2-year period, based on what we learn, think about how we expand and evolve the program. Second question here, if we received a grant from the Unity Fund for a special program this year, will we be eligible to apply for another grant for FY17? The Unity Fund is a very unique fund and will exist as is. So for those who are on the call who now have background understanding of Unity Fund, it's the closest thing that the trust has to an annual fund where we actively raise money in a given fiscal year, and money goes out to the community in that same sort of year. So money comes in, money goes out, and is directly aligned with human needs, like basic human needs. So that program will operate as it has always operated. Footnote I would add there is that we have embraced, per Tim Mazzani, our CEO, challenge of growing that fund. So historically, $500,000 to $600,000 fund, we're trying to grow it to $1 million plus fund. Question from a piece, can a nonprofit team with a research group / university, I may have been this, you read that, it's about, I want to re-up the question, my apologies, while we read this.
To meet this goal, can a nonprofit team with a research group, university, or research group or university to meet this goal? I'm not quite sure I understand.
Oh, so I mean, this I'm assuming, and whoever asked that question, yeah, please let me know if we're completely off base. We won't be. If we're answering or responding correctly. As I mentioned in Go grants, we are, as part of the sort of communication dynamic we're hoping to create, to think more about collective measurement and impact. We want to be real clear that as we move to the Go grant program, we won't be measuring narrowly defined outcomes associated with the grant. But rather, we will be working with institutions and looking at their entire, all their results, the impact that they have. One way we like to think of it internally is that we, from looking at just one part of an organization to the entire organization. The thing we're very interested in is, as a group, as a collective, particularly within sectors, we want that sector to have a deep understanding of collective impact and how we measure progress in those sectors. Heretofore, we felt that we've focused of our attention on program outcomes designed to just very thin slices in some cases of your work. I'm going to pause and ask Peggy if she wants to do a response from me.
I think we answered it correctly. That on program-specific outcomes, we are looking at outcomes that we achieve collectively towards issues that we're trying to address. So it is sector-specific. So if it's having access to health care, what are these organizations to achieve? What outcomes are they trying to achieve, and what can we collectively achieve? So what can the sector that's being funded by Go grant achieve the group? And what they share with each other about how they measure their success. So it's a bit experimental. In the lab to figure this out, but we think it's the right thing to do. When organizations that are applying for Go grants see the application, you will note that it is much shorter than we've done in the past because it's not project specific. It's about what you do and how you do it and what you expect to achieve for the next year.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I have one question, and I know Rachel documented and others. Will there be opportunities for new organizations to participate? And I want to come back to this again. So, as to Go grants, we're in our current relationship, and we are very aware that there will be a very slim chance of new organizations being in the first round of Go grants. That the Innovation Fund program is open to organizations, both recipient Go grantees as well as other organizations. So, as it relates to eligibility, you need not be a Go grant recipient in order to pitch an idea related to the Innovation Fund, and vice versa. You don't, if you're not a Go grant recipient, frankly, you're encouraged to pitch. The message we're trying to deliver is that fund is not an avenue to essentially support general operating, provide operating support for organizations. We really maintain the integrity of the fund. And fund, to give you a sense of scale, will be approximately 1/3 of our discretionary grant-making budget, which is $1 million per year. The 2/3 of that $40 million will be allocated to Go grants. That one Innovation Fund will support the responsive and proactive innovation grants, and will also support our leading change portfolio, which I'm going to get to in a moment. Any other pressing questions about Innovation or Go grants that we should address now?
Okay. One is innovation grants are between $50,000 and $75,000, correct? Not completely correct. So innovation grants can be as small as $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. And what you heard Daniel say is that our small grants are typically $25,000 and under. But in some instances, we expect that the Innovation Fund could go higher than that. And we'll talk more about the funding towards the end of the presentation.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. One question here, and we'll come back to this, Liz. Our question is, are the Go grants multi-year or annual? The program began as a 2-year pilot. So our commitment to participants in the program will be for 2 years. The caveat there is that every year all awards go through our governing board, executive committee, and they would have to approve from year to year. The something here is that absent major shifts in the organization or major disruption, that the renewal process will be relatively turnkey. And as a reminder, please mute your line so we can minimize the feedback and static for other. So move forward to the, excuse me guys. Okay, there you go. Thank you. So this section of this presentation is related to our leading change portfolio. I'm going to do some sort of context setting before I dive into this. The Executive Committee will wrestle with this notion of impact quite deeply. And the conclusion drawn was that the Chicago Community Trust needed to be in a position to take on very specific challenges that they needed to address, but quite frankly, we're not addressing at the level required to lead to transfer of meaningful change. So with that directive in mind, we spent a lot of time considering, so where do we begin in that space? Again, before I get to the topics themselves, I want to be real clear about leading change and how one should consider this program. We, apart from the pre-grant making plans, because we want to underscore the distinction that it's not a grant-making program. It's a program where the trust, working with partners, will use its labor to lead to transformative change over time. That we would convene residents, leaders, coalitions. We would, because we have resources from donors, we would deploy targeted grant support as needed. We would advise and advocate policy change. And most importantly, we work all of those tools to move obstacles that no single organization or individual can move alone. The idea is that we apply this toolkit against the challenges that are confronting our region today, pressing challenges that are confronting our region today. So after much deliberation, our staff and board have agreed to begin this work of leading change in 4 areas. First, smart things. The long history in planning, sustainable planning, meaning we've worked hard and from our perch so that planning, community planning, urban planning was integrated and comprehensive and sustainable. As we move forward, we're being committed to the space with a clear bias that planning must also advance growth and prosperity in our most challenged neighborhoods, our most challenged communities. Again, one way to think about this is of our work. There is a bias at the trust to make sure that we are allocating our time, our resources in support of our most vulnerable neighborhoods. Again, this is understood in the planning category. Oops, sorry, going backwards. Second, economic growth. It's a very category we understand, but there was commitment to impact sort of macroeconomic sort of policy and programs in this region. It's to make sure we're driving, or we're doing our part to drive investments in this place. As a faith foundation, core definition of the community foundation, we have to make sure that this region is supplying the resources and the jobs that are going to make every neighborhood, every community vibrant. Example we always use, but it's a very clear example, is to make sure that we're finding businesses that are going to deliver jobs that are paying livable wages for the community. So again, reaffirmation of our commitment in this space. Third, education. Program team led by Peggy Davis spent our time analyzing our work in education, and while we remain committed to the entire continuum of education from early childhood to post-secondary, when it comes to leading change, there was a clear gap that we identified, a gap meaning all that the trust could play in a very critical area. That gap can be best defined as sort of career pathways, that secondary to career path that we feel is sort of underexplored, and frankly, while there's a lot of work there, not as organized as it should be, or could be. It doesn't, again, that we're abandoning every other part of education. It means using the Leading Change Toolkit, we want to have an impact in this space. We want to strengthen it and evolve it. First, beginning on those existing sort of programs and organizations that are occupying this space. The fourth area in the portfolio is race. And if you attended our State of Community Luncheon on October 7th, or you could go online and read the speech that Terry Vaney, our CEO, delivered. He spends a lot of time in this area. Simply put, our executive committee, along with staff, discuss the role of the trust, the many issues that we address, were continually reminded that race, related race relations in this region continues to hamper progress. It continues to diminish true progress in too many key areas. And that in order to truly, truly transform the city and strengthen every neighborhood, we needed to deal with this issue. Clearly, anyone in this town knows over the last month how important this is. So the executive committee, again, along with staff, totally embraced this notion that we would use the Leading Change Toolkit to drive progress in this area. Before I go into the sort of last part of the speech, we want to be real clear, sort of viewing the strategic framework, heels of it being authorized and ratified by our governing body. Fully aware that we've not developed a plan or programming plan against these major areas. But we felt that it was most important to discuss strategic intent because we know, quite frankly, it would spark the type of conversation, discussion that would lead to a more formed sort of plan. We were very conscious not to go into a laboratory or conference room for 6 months and go home, but announce our intent and again spark conversation.
Good.
If you have a question or comment, most certainly use the chat. It's the best way to sort of have an organized conversation in this type of format. I will finish one last slide, and then we'll have about 30 minutes, actually more, for Q&A. I wanted the discussion of our strategy with the notion of sort of co-investment. In order to understand the space, I want to begin by set context. And just a reminder, if you're on the phone, please mute your phone or mute your computer if you're using audio through the computer.
Okay, you're welcome. Bye-bye.
So, co-investment. Setting first. For those who are unaware, this may be new, but it's important. $30 million of grants are awarded to the trust from donor-advised funds. These are grants that are driven and directed by many donors to the trust. Simply put, our program staff and our board, our governing body, do not decide grant recipients. The donor does. Our institutional responsibility is to make sure these are legal transactions, meaning that all the organizations that receive such grants are 501c3s. $100 million a year. In addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, there's $40 million of grant making that comes from our discretionary endeavor. Boards are recommended by trust staff and approved by the trust executive committee. I mentioned earlier this would be the fund that would support GO grants and our innovation fund, as well as Leading Change work. The Chicago Community Trust Executive Committee made a very clear goal in our strategic plan, and that goal is co-investment. The idea donor-directed grants and trust endowment grants with community priorities. A very simple way of understanding this is that the trust staff will develop programs, products, initiatives to align some of the $130 million directly with the programs and institutions supported out of the $40 million. This is important for public, our audience, to sort of understand. Therefore, the trust had a very passive posture when it came to the $130 million. So we would serve donors, donors would make their choices. At the point, these donor dollars would be, those endowments would become part of our discretionary endowment over time, meaning as donors pass on, as heirs passed on, there's a very clear pathway where that 130 or the endowment that supports the 130 impacts the discretionary fund. But rather wait for those to become available to our program officer staff, we're going to be very proactive at developing opportunities for donors to support priorities that we've identified in partnership with our community. In summary, one way to consider that is that we're limited by city with our Go Grant program. In order to grow that program actively, we're actively, so to speak, more support from current donors. Similarly, with the Innovation Fund, we could grow that fund by encouraging other donors to participate in that program. Again, I'm using those two to give a concrete example of what we mean by alignment. I'm going to Peggy, I give you the opportunity to fill in any gaps, but what we're going to do is take a quick scan of the questions that are coming in and respond to them efficiently and succinctly as we can.
I don't have,
Yeah.
There. And then there's one, this is a long one, that's about your lifting the curtain. You can do the lifting the curtain piece.
Oh, okay. So we have one question. Let me ask to the group advance. My eyes are getting bad, so I'm trying to see this. Are we able to provide information about our organization and performance to donors who gave us through donor advised funds when we don't have their direct contact information, e.g., for example, annual report, newsletter? We send solicitations, just information to demonstrate the impact investment. So this is the question about sort of co-investment. And a fundraiser, someone who's been a fundraiser, a development person, I can be very clear how we're going to approach this. We will programs where we're constantly telling the story of our nonprofit sector to our donors. So our new website, the newcct.org, is an example of that. It's impact and insight, and we told those stories to donors. As we move forward, we will not create opportunities for direct access to donors, because donors come to the trust because they want that level of privacy, but we're going to create tools that encourage donors to learn more about sort of our sector, our ecosystem here in Chicago, the nonprofit sector. I'll give an example of a few things we're considering, and we would welcome feedback through email or notes to our website. Sort of creating a system that's more like, I'll use a commercial example, like Amazon, where donors come to our system and they choose a fee that they have in mind. When they make that choice, we want to be in a position to make them aware of other organizations that work in a space that they've already demonstrated interest in. So if an organization comes to a grant to the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless, when they make that choice, we are considering building a system where they are informed of others who are critical to that space, that particular issue. I'm only using this as an example. It's not a real scenario. But the idea is to create, in serving our donors, a more dynamic way to broaden knowledge base and deepen their awareness levels of critical and important institutions. A more concrete way to think of it, and I'll pick up on another example I shared earlier, is to create very specific programs that they can fund. So we have a program called Smart Growth, which will remain in operation. Smart Growth is about building capacity for small and mid-sized arts organizations. Very important objective, very important for our community. Smart Growth as a program becomes, this model in mind, an opportunity for these donors to contribute to Smart Growth so that we could serve more arts organizations through such a program. There will be lots of opportunity where we're creating opportunities for the resources to be aligned with the 40 million and kind of direct to consumer, direct to donor in this way, so opportunities for them to just learn more about your organizations.
There's a question here that says, can we schedule a call or meeting with the trust to discuss potential ideas for innovation grants and hear feedback prior to submitting, and when can we start applying? So, I think alluded earlier, we haven't set up all of, and I like the way he talks about it, we haven't set up all the scaffolding for this. As a fact, we're going to spend some time in the first quarter of next year putting together the plan for innovation grant making. So I've already started to get innovation ideas, and I think that's great. But what I would suggest is that I think that there's going to be a call to action, advising everyone to register on Grant Central, because that's where we will post opportunities for innovation grant making. And it could be just an opportunity to submit ideas for consideration for our archives of ideas for innovation funding. And other times it might be a true opportunity that is specific to a particular subject matter or area. So I just want to be clear that this is, it still will be kind of by announcement or innovation. We don't have the program at this point. So I would say the best thing to do so that your ideas don't get lost in this sort of holiday period is wait till after the first of the year when we'll start looking at this in a more detailed way.
Mm-hmm. So, here's a question that's related to the Innovation Fund. Are other breakthrough ideas or other categories eligible? So I mentioned entrepreneurship, reimagining, rebuilding the public square, and aspiring philanthropy. Those are things that we have our strategic plan process very committed to and very focused on. But absolutely exclusive. It's where we want to begin. By definition, we want the program to be responsive. We want organizations to be in a position, as Peggy just mentioned, to pitch or share ideas with us. Again, as she mentioned, the infrastructure for receiving that inbound will be put in place in the coming months, but we're looking above and beyond those three areas that I mentioned. But it's important for you to know that those are priority areas for us. Is that another question? Question: If you currently have a small grant under $25,000, can you still qualify for a Gold grant? This is a question that will require a direct follow with whomever the program officer is that made a small grant, because I go to every single case specifically, but in general, it's an important takeaway for everyone. Like the Gold Grant program, a pool of sort of nonprofits that we're working with the Gold Grant program are those organizations with sort of a connection over the past 3 years in those areas or as mentioned earlier. You have a current relationship with a specific program officer. I would encourage you to reach out to that person directly in order to get some concrete follow-up. I mentioned a moment ago about the sort of call to action. Again, since this is a public call and anyone can sort of participate, it's really important that if you are aligned with a nonprofit, your nonprofit should be registered in our Grant Central system, which is available. You can do it through our website. We'll be sending links to the system to all the as we have people who participate in these type of sessions. And putting out that profile is really key because we will use that platform as a way to share information to our nonprofit partners. A program is Grant Central, and you go to our homepage and you see the login button in the left-hand margin. Be able to click through, and there'll be two links: one for donors and one for nonprofits. Follow nonprofit path and register for if you're not sure.
I can answer that one. There's left. The program officer has left the trust, Daniel. You just mentioned that they should reach out to their program officer. So you should still call and ask who's taking calls for that person, and your call will be redirected.
Yeah. So either previous program officers left, as Peg said, make the call. You'll be directed to whomever is picking up that person's program. Sure, you make the call. We are going to do our absolute best to respond directly to every call, every email. Our sort of foundation, of our strategy is service. We want to be highly responsive. And historically, the trust and I have always been comprehensive responsiveness. So we're aiming to do that. So again, email, phone calls, and our ability is to react. With questions that come in, trying to we have, if there are questions that you don't think we've addressed adequately, please address that chat box. Then about where can I find the leadership toolkit I was referencing. Just to be clear, the leadership toolkit was, I'll go back a bit on the slide so you can see. The I'm trying to illustrate here is that we were discussing, I was discussing the broad sort of leadership toolkit for us as we think about leading change. We have those 4 areas are sort of topics, and the leading change portfolio is much broader than grant making. It's more about what the trust, what we do in partnership with the community. So it is about convening residents, business leaders, civic leaders, building coalitions, grant support as needed. And quite frankly, we want to build on a sort of existing infrastructure. Our mandate at the board level, just to underscore that, was us had to sort of position itself as much more than a revenue source for the region, for the nonprofit, and a leader working to address those tough, considerably pressing issues facing our community. And quite frankly, moving to the Go Grant program creates space for our professional staff to others to be in this space. It's not about managing RFP programs, it's about relationships with the community against these challenges. We're able to provide information about, this to Dad. Okay, we have that. What if he believes it fits into several areas of funding? Practically speaking, how best to move ahead, what are the next steps of the program? How to contact trust program officers?
Can I
Say that again.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to answer a couple of questions. There's another question here about timing for Go Grants. So we already have launched the Go Grant program. We're doing it in the same time frame that the trust has made grants over the last, however long it's been doing, in cycles. And the cycles are, there's a cycle in January, there's one in May, and there's one in September. That's the way we're building the Go Grant organization. So in November of this year, organizations typically funded in January that will get Go Grants were notified to apply. They submit their application, and the board will make decisions in January. There'll be another group of organizations invited to apply for the May board meeting, so probably March or April. And for the September meeting, probably late July, August. So in the same cycles that we have typically done, competitive grants will do the Go Grants. In more than one area, I agree with Daniel that you ought to reach out to the program officer and program officers with whom you have dealt, because we have several organizations that were funded in more than one area.
Did you say education?
Is there to bring
Education.
on education specifics? That's not a question I want to
Okay. So people here, there's some questions around like personnel choices that we've not made as an institution, and we just don't want to sort of address that publicly yet in terms of what the staff, what categories we're going to fund versus not fund. So one of those things that we would ask you to just be patient as we get internal mechanisms to make those choices. But we're not sure we see the question. It's something we should consider. Okay. So we think we've exhausted or covered the questions that have been asked. We're very aware that we have 30 or so folks still on the phone, but we want to make sure, again, if there is a question that hasn't been asked, you do now. Again, while we're waiting, while we're potential comments or questions, I want to underscore the Register for Grand Central. Important to receiving information. Two, sort of moving forward, the expectation on our part is to hear the community about all of this, and we're documenting that. I have a very specific question to address, even because we're updating our FAQ. We're creating an FAQ, free questions document that will be uploaded to the website. So again, be aggressive in sharing those questions and thoughts so that then we can respond to the broader community. So, no additional questions. Again, we can give it a few minutes. This is the actual presentation, and for you guys the time to participate, we're extremely thankful that you're interested, and hope to hear from you again. Oh.